All right, we're back here for the final two picks, and as you may have noticed, I kind of got away from talking about our actual rankings here, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that after a certain point in the draft, the picture making have less to do with rankings overall and more to do with what you need team by team. Now that's more a statement about overall rankings, but again, it's kind of like you look at your team and you look at like what kind of player do I want? Do I want someone with upside? Do I want a safe, steady producer who's not too flashy, etc. These are the questions you got to ask yourself. Anyway, we're down to the last two picks here. I'm going to take a quarterback or a wide receiver, excuse me, and that's going to be Jacoby Jones. Like I was talking about earlier, I just think that he has to be more involved in the Baltimore offense this year since they lost Anquan Bolden. And I mean, I'm willing to take a gamble and buy him now and see what happens during the preseason, how much they use him in those first quarters when the starters actually play. Based on that, we can decide if he's a player I want to hold on to or someone I need to drop. I mean, it could be that A.J. Jenkins looks terrible in the preseason, and he's the guy I end up dropping for a kicker. Anyway, I will take a defense here in the last round, and honestly, I haven't done a whole lot of research on defense. Most of my rankings were based upon what happened, what I remember from last year. So I'm just going to go with the top-ranked defense from our rankings. And that appears to be, let's see, the New York Giants. There they are, top-ranked. Let's see, Tampa Bay. They are a little further down here. Did I miss them in the rankings? No, they're just not in our top whatever. So, yeah, New York Giants, we'll add them to the team. Now, I want to take a quick moment here and kind of review some of the other teams in the league and see how they turned out. I'm not going to be too critical because, like I've been saying kind of all along, this has been a learning experience for me, I know. And this early in the season, nobody really knows exactly what they're doing. So let's take a look at Consult Fantasy's team here first. He has Matt Ryan, Randall Cobb, Hakeem Nicks, Josh Gordon. There's a nice little passing attack there. He has Doug Martin, DeMarco Murray, Antonio Gates, Ahmad Bradshaw, and the New England defense. That's his starting lineup. And then on his bench, he's got Shane Vereen, Jonathan Franklin, Michael Floyd, Jay Cutler, Cordarrelle Patterson, who's the guy I admitted not knowing about earlier, and Brandon LaFell. This seems like a quality squad. He seems to be putting a lot of eggs in the Josh Gordon basket, but after last season, I can't blame him. Gordon was really great, and if anything, the weak point to me here is Antonio Gates, and not to say that there is an upside there. It's just it's a risky pick. But yeah, all in all, this team looks very solid, assuming that Bradshaw can produce in Indiana, which I'm not really. I didn't say Indiana. I meant to say Indianapolis. But not saying that he's not going to do that. I expect him to be pretty good. He's a player I like. So let's take a look at who's next here on the list. Fantasy Schnerd. Tom Brady at quarterback. Wide receivers are Fitzgerald, Stevie Johnson, and Emmanuel Sanders. Those guys are solid. Running backs, Arian Foster, Chris Johnson, and Monty Ball. Jermichael Finley is his tight end, and Green Bay is his defense. So it's possible that he's going all in on these kind of older running backs, Foster and Johnson. Like Foster's, like neither of them that old per se, but they've got a lot of miles on them. That seems to be the part I'd be worried about, but that's not to say these guys won't be good this year. They both have the same bye week, incidentally. That's something I tend to not worry about when it comes to drafting teams like that. On his bench, he has Chris Ivory, Isaiah Peed, Ryan Broyles, and we are going to a whole different page here. Let's go back to his team and show me. Oh, now I get to see the stats and the little pictures. God bless this Yahoo draft software. I don't like how it doesn't organize them by position anymore, though. It just does it by pick order. Although this is probably a better way to discuss a draft, to be honest. Broyles, Alshon Jeffrey, Brandon Myers, Matt Schaub, Green Bay, Dan Bailey. Yeah, so this team seems solid. Yeah, I like this one too. We're moving on down to @TrashTalkFF. These are all Twitter handles, or at least the first three were. So if you want to give these guys a follow on Twitter or ask them questions about what their draft strategy was, you can do that. I hope that they don't mind me telling you all that. Trash Talk's draft started out with AP, first overall, I'm sure, and then he took Reggie Bush and David Wilson, started off 3 running backs. I like that strategy. I don't know if David Wilson's the guy I would have taken there, but 3 running backs to start seems good. Then he went with wide receivers, Wes Welker and Pierre Garçon, both quality players. Garçon is a bit of an injury risk. Wes Welker is getting old, but, I mean, again, this early in the year, it's hard to say if any of these are bad picks necessarily. Tony Romo is his QB. I like Romo a lot. Giovanni Bernard is a nice value, making up for any trepidation I would have about the David Wilson pick, to be honest, because one of those guys will probably be pretty good. To round out his draft, he had Anquan Bolden, Mark Ingram, Owen Daniels, DeAndre Hopkins, Ronnie Hillman, Chris Givens, the Cincinnati Bengals defense, Blair Walsh, and Phil Rivers. This is not a team. This team has a lot of guys that I'm not super high on, but it does have a lot of just kind of predictable players. And there's something to be said about that. Like Anquan Bolden, Mark Ingram, you know what you're going to get from those guys. So if you've built your team accordingly to take advantage of those players and what they do well, you're doing something right. Let's take a look at Asher's team next. He's one of the writers at the Fake Football. He led off with the 6th overall pick, taking Alfred Morris, and in round 2 he got Steven Jackson, and then Frank Gore. Now talk about predictable running back commodities, right? Those are 3 of the steadiest guys you could probably hope for. After those guys, he took Dwayne Bowe, Rob Gronkowski, Andrew Luck, Greg Jennings, T.Y. Hilton, and Lance Moore. Again, just kind of going with known commodities. I like this strategy. There's not a whole lot of risk here. I mean, Gronkowski is risky, but if he plays, he's totally worth that pick. Lance Moore is a guy who's tends to get his points in bunches. He doesn't score, like he averages a lot of points, but he gets those points in big games for the most part. To round out his bench, Asher took Zach Stacy, Martellus Bennett, Brian Quick, Joe Flacco, Mike Goodson, the Rams defense, and Justin Tucker, the Baltimore Ravens kicker. I guess Martellus Bennett isn't his bench necessarily if Gronkowski doesn't play, but yeah, this is a solid squad. I like this team a lot. There's not a whole lot more else I want to say about it. Cheeseheads West is up next, and he started off with Ray Rice, Maurice Jones-Drew, and Victor Cruz. Then he took Reggie Wayne, Matthew Stafford, and Cecil Shorts. The law firm was added to the team after that. Then Greg Olson, Mike Williams, Ben Tate, Vincent Brown, Danny Woodhead, Denard Robinson, and Jordan Cameron. Baltimore's defense, and Matt Prater to round things out. This team seems pretty good. I like the running backs. The wide receivers are, again, kind of predictable veteran commodities at this point. Cecil Shorts, maybe not necessarily, but I expect him to be just as good as he was last year in this season. Greg Olson is a guy I'm not a huge fan of, but I cannot deny his fantasy potential. After Cheeseheads is iMock, whoever that is. LaShawn McCoy, Jimmy Graham, Percy Harvin, Colin Kaepernick. This is a all upside first 4 rounds, I'll tell you. And then right after the Kaepernick pick, Russell Wilson. Maybe he was on auto draft, I'm not sure, but that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. After that, he took Steve Smith, Deshaun Jackson, Miles Austin, and Daryl Richardson, Pierre Thomas, Willis McGahee. Then Michael Turner, Brandon Lloyd, the Broncos defense, Kobe Fleener, and Sebastian Janikowski. I like the Fleener pick, although I will admit that I think I like Dwayne Allen, the other Colts tight end, a little bit more. That said, this team is very dangerous. McCoy could have a huge year and really bounce back under the new coach there. Running back is definitely the weak point of this team. I mean, after McCoy, his number 2 running back is Daryl Richardson and then Pierre Thomas. So this isn't a team I like, but the wide receivers and tight ends and upside at quarterback might make up for it. You never know. After this team is Mock and Roll. Mock and Roll started off with Jamal Charles, Demaryius Thomas, and Aaron Rodgers. 3 elite talents at their positions. And position scarcity be damned, I guess. I mean, if you get Aaron Rodgers in the 3rd round, like he was a first-round pick for most leagues last year. And when this starts to happen, when the fantasy culture shifts and a player like Rodgers slips to the 3rd round, that's when you're actually getting value on those players. He took Torrey Smith, Lamar Miller, Jason Witten, and Eddie Lacy after that. There's a lot of, Witten's a pretty known commodity, and so is Torrey Smith, but Lamar Miller and Eddie Lacy are both upside picks. Kenny Britt is another upside pick, as well as Bryce Brown. Sidney Rice, Bernard Pierce, Malcolm Floyd, Brian Hartline, and Phil Dawson were his next picks, and he finished up with Arizona's defense and Sam Bradford. This team seems pretty solid and very good at... it's got, like I said, elite talent at each position, which is good. I like that a lot. That way you never feel like you're behind at any position on a given week. Like when you look at your matchup and you see, oh, my opponent has, I don't know, Jimmy Graham at tight end and I'm running out some streaming tight end. Like you might have drafted your team to do that, but at the same time, it's always, you see that in the matchup and you know that that's where you are behind in so many words, All right, let's move on here. NFL Soup Kevin. I think this was one of the auto drafters, and he ended up with Trent Richardson, Brandon Marshall, Roddy White, Vincent Jackson. So wide receivers, he's stacked. Mike Wallace is going to play flex or sit on the bench for him. RG3 is his QB. He also has Mendenhall, Vernon Davis, the Niners defense, Steven Gostkowski. This is definitely an auto drafter based upon the way Yahoo auto drafts. It filled out his starting lineup before it took any bench players. His bench is therefore comprised of D'Angelo Williams, Michael Vick, Jermaine Gresham, Santonio Holmes, Bilal Powell, and the Pittsburgh defense. So running back is the weakness of this team. Rashard Mendenhall is his number 2 guy, but his wide receivers are very good. And if you care about having a good kicker or a good defense and quality, or like at least upside QBs, this guy's set. If he comes back after the draft and makes some trades, trade some of his depth at QB or wide receiver to get a running back, he could be in really good shape to start the season. All right, keeping it moving. We got 3 teams left here. Nick Callaway is up next. He started off with Calvin Johnson and Julio Jones back-to-back. Double wide receivers. I advocated this strategy a couple years ago, and I am still a bit of a proponent. I don't know if it's the way I'd go this season, but I think that if you can hit on some mid-round running back values, this strategy ends up being very good. He took Cam Newton 3rd, and that's where I think you have to diverge a little bit from the 2 wide receiver start. I think in the 3rd round, you got to look running back first. It's possible he didn't like anybody more than Cam Newton, but that's a pick he might end up regretting. Marquez Colston was his next pick, and there you go. Just 3 wide receivers and a QB to start off the draft. After that, he did look to pick up some running backs. He took Ryan Matthews, then Antonio Brown, then Vic Ballard. So with Matthews and Ballard as his starters, he's got 3 awesome wide receivers and then Antonio Brown at flex. And he took Kyle Rudolph for his tight end spot and the Seattle defense as his defense. Repetitive, Greg is repetitive. And Matt Bryan is his kicker. Now, this might have been an auto draft. I'm not sure. I don't think so, though. And I guess if you are going to skimp on running backs, that is one way to justify taking the top-ranked defense highly. You just admit that you're giving up value at running back, and you assume that you're getting the best defense. The problem is that defenses rarely repeat back-to-back as being the top point getters. On his bench, he has Roethlisberger, Sean Green, Jared Cook, Michael Bush, Aaron Dobson, and Tampa Bay's defense. Looking at that makes me think that maybe this was more auto draft than not. So that might explain some of it. But again, like if Vic Ballard pays off, this team is in a pretty good spot. He will probably need to trade a wide receiver for running back at some point, though. Parks is up next. He led off with C.J. Spiller, Stephen Ridley, Drew Brees. I like that start. That's pretty solid. Danny Amendola was his 4th-round pick and his first wide receiver. I'm not sure if that would have been the best wide receiver available. I'd have to go back and look at the results, but that's going all in on a guy who is spending his first year with the team. He'll probably be great, to be honest. Like I believe he'll be good, but there's some risk there. Le'Veon Bell was next. Then Denario Alexander, Dennis Pitta, Tavon Austin, Denarius Moore, Justin Blackman, Jaquiz Rogers, the Houston defense, Darius Hayward-Bay, Carson Palmer, Heath Miller, and Lawrence Tynes. So it's pretty clear what this drafter was doing. He was taking a lot of upside picks in the middle rounds with guys like DX, Levon Bell, and Tavon Austin, and he rounded that out with some veteran players at the end, the Darius Hayward-Bays, Heath Millers, Jaquiz Rogers, like known quantities. Anyway, this team seems pretty good. I'm not a huge fan, although I do like his running backs, and in this day and age, that often determines how good your fantasy team is going to be. It's just how set up you are to succeed at running back without giving up too much value at the other positions. Last up is the Sex Boat Extravaganza. Good team name. This is Spencer's team, and he took A.J. Green and Des Bryant to start off the draft. Wide receivers back-to-back, and then he took Peyton Manning. I think those might have been auto picks. Similar to that team we saw earlier that took Calvin Johnson and Julio Jones back-to-back, although I don't know if these wide receivers are quite up to that level, considering the fact that Calvin Johnson is just the best wide receiver on the planet. That's not to say these other guys aren't great. Like, I really like both A.J. Green and Bryant. His first running back was Darren McFadden. His second running back was Jonathan Stewart. And he picked up Andre Brown. So I like Andre Brown, but when he's your third running back and your second running back is Jonathan Stewart, you're playing catch-up at that position. He's got Eric Decker and Tony Gonzalez. He also has Fred Jackson, Noshawn Moreno, Kendall Wright, Andy Dalton, Golden Tate, the Bears defense, Andre Roberts, and Daniel Thomas. He's got a lot of lottery tickets here at running back, and that's a good thing for this squad. Because he took the wide receivers early, he recognized that he needed to go all in on running backs with his other picks to make sure that at least one of those guys will pay off and hopefully become a guy he can start week to week alongside Darren McFadden. Of course, this assumes Darren McFadden is going to play the whole season, which is a very a big assumption. Let's put it at that. But all in all, like, the strategy here is sound, and I like that about this team. So that about does it. This is definitely the longest draft video I've ever recorded because I've never recapped teams like this, but one of the folks in the chat requested that we do this, and hopefully some of the other writers will write up maybe a little bit about how this draft went. I can't promise they're going to do that, but it's possible. So stay tuned to the Fake Football for hopefully some of those recaps and also more of these draft videos in the future. And I hope to have some guest hosts on with me for upcoming videos to draft against me, and we can discuss picks being made and just to see the thought process of other drafters, because not every fantasy league is won in the same way. The way I draft is different than the way someone else drafts, and that doesn't necessarily mean that either of us is wrong, but it is interesting to see the differences and talk about why we make the picks that we do. Which is half the reason I do these videos, to be honest, is just to kind of think through my own thought process out loud. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll catch you next time on thefakefootball.com.